Yeah, I think that's kind of what. So my wife always gives me a hard time because I'll start talking to the person behind the desk or cashing us out. I'm just asking about their technology, and she says that I'm always coming across as a creeper. But we went and rented a car, and they were using the same credit card reader as us, but they had this really cool enclosure for it. So, I was asking questions about that and, trying to figure out how we could implement that in our world. But, I think that, you have to kind of be looking in all directions and try to figure out how you can take what somebody else is doing and incorporate it into our world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Modern Car Wash podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Zelaznik, and you just heard from AJ Davison, the Director of IT for Hoffman Development. Now, Hoffman Development operates Hoffman Car Wash, Hoffman Jiffy Lube, and innovative car wash equipment. AJ has been with the company for 21 years and was able to blaze his own path. He was able to convince Tom Hoffman Jr. and our president, Ron Sloan, to essentially create the IT department. It started as a staff of 1, and now it is up to a staff of 11 with hundreds, if not thousands, connected devices throughout the company. AJ gives us insight into his role, his 24 hours a day job, essentially, developing his staff, cybersecurity, what operators should be looking into when it comes to IT. Ton of knowledge in this conversation with AJ. I hope you enjoy it. AJ Davison, welcome to the Modern Car Wash podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So for the listeners out there, it took some doing to get you in here, and I offered you up beer and coffee. Yes. As you can see, you have your Starbucks coffee in front of you, and for the listeners at home who can't see, AJ's drinking a latte right now. But I guess the start off I guess I didn't really leave it up and on. I didn't give you the option between beer and coffee. I just said what kind of coffee you want. So
that's true.
You're on your deathbed.
I am.
And you have to choose between, I don't know, a tasty IPA or a cup of coffee. Which one are you going for?
I think it depends on the time of day. If it's early morning, coffee wins all the time. After work, IPA.
Yeah. It seems that just seeing you in your environment here, walking around, there's probably a lot of days when you need that cold beverage when you go home.
Yes.
So our company, the way I started about 5 years ago, and I was trying to remember, I think there were 5 IT members when I started. What's your staff up to now?
So we have 11 total now. So we've grown a lot, over the even just the past 5 years when you came. So we've, I never expected it to kind of grow as fast as it did, but here we are. It's pretty exciting.
What's funny is, I guess not funny, just when you look at it, it's grown to 11 people, but you also have outside help as well.
Yeah.
Our POS is through MicroLogic.
Yeah.
There's multiple developers on their staff. I know 2 in particular are working on a fundraising page for us. We have another developer who helps with website, things like that. So when you look at all encompassing, what's that number up to?
I think it's hard to put a number on it. Like you said, at MicroLogic, we have a number of developers that we can work with on any given day. I like to look at it as, they're kind of an extension of my team. They're always there for us. And, I think they work really hard to make sure we've got the cutting edge technology that we need.
We had Tom Hoffman Jr., the owner of Hoffman Development, CEO. We were talking about it. He made a statement that car washes are essentially IT firms now. It's all driven by the IT department or by information technology. There's tons of data to go about it. But you got your start in the Jiffy Lube.
It did.
So for those who don't know, Hoffman Development operates currently 9 Jiffy Lubes, three of the highest volume Jiffy Lubes. How did you work your way from, I guess, I don't even know what level you entered the Jiffy Lube at. So
Sure.
can you just expand on your background?
Yeah, so I actually, my dad owns his own business. He does Port Foundation, so I always expected that I'd take over his business. When I was 16, he told me, it's time for you to go get a part-time job. I'm not going to cart you around after school. So, I ended up at Jiffy Lube, applied there. I wanted to learn a little bit about cars, figured, it'd be a summer job, and I'd be back to work with my dad after school was over. I really I started vacuuming cars, loved working on cars. I was able to, work my way up. Ended up managing the store that I was at while I went to college, and I think I spent probably 10 years, kind of knocking down Tom and Ron's door, asking for a shot at a full-time IT role here. They didn't have any, formal IT department. They had outside consultant, and really Tom, helped, facilitate a lot of the other needs in the IT side. So I think Ron was kind of just sick of hearing it, and eventually said, "Okay, fine, we'll give you a shot." So I kind of just, kept going to him and kept asking him if he thought that it'd be a position that was worthwhile here, and I think it took a while for him to kind of agree to that, but like I said, the growth kind of speaks for itself. I think we were all missing a lot in that area, and that's kind of my story here.
How long ago was that?
So I've been with the company for 20 years. I started in 1999, so 21 years, I guess, now. But I started here full-time doing IT 8 years ago.
So those early days of IT, was it helping put people's out of office messages up, or was it?
Yeah, there was some of that. I think that there's.
I guess you always have some of that.
We always have some of that.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of break fix stuff. A lot of things that were kind of left unattended for a while, and implementing processes and those types of things.
When did that get to? Because when you look at the IT department, and this isn't just here. It's so encompassing, right?
Yeah.
It's away messages, it's email, it's that infrastructure. But for us, it's also POS, web security, tunnel controls, etc. When did you go from kind of that basic stuff into PLCs, things along those lines?
I think it kind of just happened organically. My first full-time year, we actually opened Vestal, and just being out there, and we were kind of, I think, all jumping in and doing whatever needed to be done. And once I had the IT side set, I kind of just started asking questions, started playing around. And I've done programming my whole life. IT's always been a hobby for me, before my formal education. So, as soon as I started playing around with the PLCs, and just listening to Tom talk about just how passionate he was, and the things that he could do with the PLC, I took an interest right away, and really kind of decided I really wanted to learn that. So I think it really started early on at Vestal, and it kind of just organically happened from there.
So Vestal, for our listeners, is it was, I think at the time, maybe the 16th car wash location that Hoffman Car Wash opened. It out of market, so about 2.5 hours southwest of Albany, New York. And probably I think it's our highest volume store to date. We just opened a second location about 2 years ago, right up the street from that, and that this year has kind of taken off and given its own run for the money. But I digress. And what did you go? You were attending college when you were working at Jiffy Lube. Did you finish college?
Yeah, so I went to ITT Tech. I got an associate in applied science. Computer networking was my concentration, and really what my core strengths were in. But I like I said to you, I've done a lot of development. My whole life is, one of my hobbies. So, I'm fairly strong in the development side as well.
I think it's refreshing to see someone who made a hobby their career, right? You're passionate about something, and then obviously you're gonna strive when you have that passion for something. When you started to grow your team, was it? And for a lot of time, it was taking people who worked in the car wash or the Jiffy Lube and then bringing them over. So I'm assuming they shared the same passion for you, which helped you exceed the growth of the IT department.
Definitely. Yeah. So I think, our size, we had, in my opinion, a solid talent pool. And I think, the car washing industry is so unique, right? And a lot of the staff that I have, even now, most of them, as you said, came from the car wash. They grew up in the car wash and the company just like I did. So, they already knew the company. They know how crazy it can be sometimes, which I think is the hardest thing coming from, outside the industry. Just, the pace at which we move, I think is sometimes challenging for people. So the fact that they get that, and like you said, they're passionate. It's been a hobby for them. It makes them really successful.
So take us through. This is going to sound silly, but I was going to say take us through a normal day for you. But I know that doesn't exist, right?
Yeah, so I think now the days are a little bit more predictable because I've been doing it for so long, and I just mean predictable in that you're gonna move in so many different directions. You kind of come in with a couple things that you hope to accomplish, and try not to overload your daily list. That way you can kind of react to some of these other things that come up. So some of them are fires, right? So we have to put out fires and, find some issues. One of the things that I really like about working here is that it's not necessarily a fire that's going to come up. It's, hey, I have this really cool idea. We should do that. And just organically, it turns into like, hey, we need to do it now. Mm-hmm. And just the ability to kind of jump into new technology or some programming to try to figure out how we can make it work is a lot of fun.
I think the company's fortunate to have. If you look at the leadership, right, Tommy is very immersed in it. Ron gets it. Our president gets it. So you're kind of like on the third level when it comes to that structure, but. This podcast isn't about information technology. It's not for IT directors. So I'm sure there's people that can certainly relate to you. But, if you had to speak directly to an operator who maybe doesn't get it, what do you think the key message is? Or what would you like them to understand about the IT department?
Sure. Yeah, so I've actually had quite a few conversations with different operators, and I think a lot of them are even now very similar to the conversations I had with Tom and Ron in the early days. Like I said, felt like 10 years trying to explain to them that they need an IT department, and here are the reasons why. I think the big things are a lot of people focus on or really just move that responsibility onto the point of sale company, right? They feel like it's the point of sale company's responsibility to install their hardware, set up their software, and then everything else, right? So, make sure that their network is secure, handle basic troubleshooting that's not POS related. And those are things outside of the POS's scope. And if you're kind of just hoping and praying that they're going to take care of your network and, all of your systems, I think that's really just a recipe for disaster. So I think it's about taking ownership of what's yours, right? So, the systems are yours, the network is yours. There's lots of sensitive information. We're taking payments, and we've got, employees' information in our systems and, customer records, so license plates, first name, last name, email address. It's really the owner's responsibility to secure those items and make sure that they're secured. So, that was my message kind of early on. And really, anytime an operator asks me, it's still my message. I think at the basic level, if you're going to let things that are basic break fix kind of just go, you continue to open yourself up to, security breaches or, just a customer experience that's not, perfect.
I know just in conversations with you, and I want to shift to cybersecurity, you dealt with a situation somewhat fairly early on in your role here, and it seems like that has kind of, I don't want to say it's defined you, but I think it's given you an approach or a framework of how you operate. Can you just, for our listeners, explain what happened?
Sure, yeah. So we had, we were building a new location. We opened up a port for, a vendor to connect in and do some updates. And we forgot to go back through and close that port. So what ended up happening, or what it led to, was somebody was able to gain entry into our systems. They put a keylogger on our systems. We were very lucky that we were kind of alerted to it early on. So it was, I think the keylogger was only on for a few days. So in the grand scheme of things, it could have been a lot worse, which I think is the part that always sticks in the back of my head, right? So if the if the dominoes didn't fall in the way that they did, it could have been catastrophic from a business perspective.
It's funny. I talked about when I started here 5 years ago, and I went from a company who was maybe a little bit more lax and things like that, and that's one of the things that kind of I had shock at first, was really the protocols in place to keep us secure. One of the things that we keep seeing, and I'm sure this is no different than anyone else out there, is the amount of phishing attacks on our employees or our email accounts.
Yeah.
Is that, I guess there's probably a million things that keep you up at night, but how concerned are you about this? Because it's out of your hands. It's up to the employees to make the right decisions.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's what businesses all over the world are struggling with, and really to be honest, on a personal level, people are struggling with it, right? So I think it goes beyond phishing and is really social engineering as a whole. Phishing is a component of that, but if you think about it, a lot of our systems, here or worldwide, are a lot more secure, right? It's harder to get credit card numbers now. It's harder to, get bank account, information. So, and that's just basic security on the network level and the hardware level. But now, to gain access, you need somebody on the inside to help you. So, what people are doing now are exploiting, what people are meant to do. People try to help people, right? So, the employee thinks that they're being helpful. They think that they're helping a coworker or a vendor or whomever, and ultimately it's not who they say they are, and before you know it, you're compromised in some way, size, shape, or form.
So from your standpoint, or from your expertise, what are things that companies can implement today that would make them safer?
Sure. So from a social engineering standpoint, I think it's all about training, right? So you have to let your people know what the risks are, why it's important for them to kind of follow the training, what's at risk, right? So, like I said earlier, it's not just about the employer's data or the customer's data. I think the employees have to kind of understand that their data is at risk too. So we talk about your work there, you get paid, so your social security number, your first name, last name, address, all your information, probably a bank account, is stored somewhere in the company's system or a company's vendor's system. So if anybody ever gains access to that, they have this trove of information, right? So I think it's about making your employees aware that it's it's bigger than just the business. You personally could be impacted. So, just training to that, how to spot, a phony email, or, making sure that, you're verifying who's on the other end of the phone. Is it really who they say they are? And, same with emails, is this really the person that they say they are? So, training absolutely is number one thing.
It seems like there's really no time like the present. And I think people probably fall into that, well, it's not going to happen to us. It's not going to happen to us until it's too late.
Right.
And then you're scrambling and you're trying to figure it out. I think from my seat in the company is working the marketing department. One of the things that I keep close eye on is our website. And it's funny because I think it was maybe a couple months ago, we had like an Aussie Rules football website. I couldn't even explain what happened, but like this is another example of things that could be happening to your company. Can you just explain what happened to us?
Sure. Yeah. So we had an exploit in one of our themes. So they were able to gain access, and they just used us as a redirect site. So anybody who wanted to watch the football game, they used kind of our resources to throw that game up, and people got to watch football for for free over the weekend. So. Again, it wasn't super impactful to us, but it was enough to, make us run around and, change some things. And, so it's just, I think you're right. Everybody always has that mentality of like, it's never going to happen to us. I know that I had that very early on. That's not going to happen to us. And I think that was probably the best experience for me to kind of, as horrible as it is, kind of go through that. Like, well, you're not invincible. It can happen to anybody, anytime.
Mm-hmm.
So,
especially if you look at car wash as an industry and the growth that it's experiencing, it's just the target is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. I want to shift a little bit. We talked about POS a little bit. I had mentioned we use MarketLogic as ours, and there's certainly many out there who, and I'm not trying to promote MarketLogic here, but that's your background, and you've been very impactful on their growth as well. And for the most part, for a long time, Hoffman's has kind of been their biggest customer. They now have Mr. working for them, which certainly it doesn't really change anything, but they've had to up their staff, etc. When you look at a POS, and maybe people are thinking about changing or getting into the industry or whatever it is, what do you think some of the keys are for a good POS?
Well, I think in the car wash world, they need to be able to adapt and change quickly. I think probably at least once a day, at the very least 3 times a week, I'm on the phone with MicroLogic talking about, hey, we have this new idea. This is what we're thinking of doing. Can you do it? And they'll say, yeah, absolutely, we can do that, or no, we can't do that, but what if we do this, or we can make your idea better by doing this. So I think first and foremost, they absolutely need to be able to quickly change and pivot. And I think the pandemic was a huge example of that. So we needed to quickly move from accepting credit card, paper currency, to like we need something on an app, and we need to be able to show a barcode and scan it and go. And MicroLogic was very good to us and to really all their customers, and they were able to quickly turn that around. So I think that's key in the car wash world.
Do you look at other industries for inspiration, or do you say, hey, I was at Starbucks and they're doing this, can we incorporate that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of what. So my wife always gives me a hard time because I'll start talking to the person behind the desk, or cashing us out. I'm just asking about their technology, and she says that I'm always coming across as a creeper. But we went and rented a car, and they were using the same credit card reader as us, but they had this really cool enclosure for it. So I was asking questions about that, and trying to figure out how we could implement that in our world. But I think that you have to kind of be looking in all directions and try to figure out how you can take what somebody else is doing and incorporate it into our world.
So going back or sticking on the POS question, obviously the pandemic probably sped a lot of things up. But when you look a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, what do you think the future of the POS is?
Sure. Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. It's the pandemic certainly sped up a lot of mobile payment processing. So, I envisioned that was the way that it was going to go, but I thought that it was going to be a lot longer before we got there. So I see that only growing. I think people are used to it now, and they were kind of forced into it. And I think there's an element of enjoyment there, right? A lot of people, enjoy just, do it on my phone. I don't have to, interact with the kiosk. I don't have to hand people money or credit card. I just do what I need to do, and off I go. So I think that will continue to grow and be more ingrained in day-to-day transactions. And AI really is in its infancy, kind of all the way around. I mean, I know that there's a lot of different companies utilizing AI, but it's a relatively new technology, and I wonder what the future holds in the car wash industry for AI. I mean, a lot of people are rolling out LPR now, which I feel like is part of AI, and the ability to kind of get a better picture of your customers in that sense. But anything from inventory levels and chemical and all that stuff, I think that AI is certainly pretty intriguing in that regard.
It's you're talking about. I know the IT department from my world, right? I know it from being able to send emails, operate the website, security. Then you talk about, all right, POS and the technology in the tunnel, but like things along the lines of chemical control and inventory. It doesn't even cross my mind that IT is going to play a role in that, which goes into we talk about the future of the POS, but what's the future of IT departments moving forward?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. I do think if history is any indication here, like I said, I never anticipated that the IT department would blow up or balloon to what it is now. And I feel like every single day there's new ideas or there's new advancements that kind of circle in the IT group. And it does feel like we kind of have our hands in everything. So, just from a data perspective, providing data for accounting or inventory, those types of things. It's really going to be interesting. I think it's just going to continue to IT is going to continue to be more and more ingrained in everything we do.
I think when people think of IT personnel, they probably have a stereotype in their mind,
Sure.
Which I don't think you fall into. And I think one of your best features is, again, like you just said, finance is calling you in the thing, marketing's calling you in the things, operations calling you in the things. It's just having people skills and being able to relate to people and understand where they're coming from. Do you find that's an issue with kind of going through an interview process and bringing in more people to the IT department?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of, like I said earlier, a lot of what we have, they were brought from inside, so it certainly helps in that regard, right? So I feel like a lot of my success and the things that you were just talking about come from working in the Jiffy Lube, right? I had constant customer interaction, constant employee interaction, and interaction, with day-to-day operations, so. I feel like that really kind of built the foundation for, my ability to, not only interact with people, but, have a basic business understanding of, what we're doing every day. So I think that's been huge for me. And as I see, my staff kind of coming in from other locations and watching what they're doing every day, I see a lot of that too. They get it. They've been the person on the front line who's been impacted by a tablet that's not working. or they've been, they've had to shut down their car wash because the tunnel's not, the PLC or, the controller's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. So I think that those experiences have really helped, my staff. But when we do bring in some outside interviews, I do find that, there's at times there's a big gap between, the people that we've brought in from internally and the people that are interviewing from outside.
IT or technology, for the most part, is something you can't read a book about, forget it, and it's going to stay the same, right? You constantly have to develop. You have to develop your staff to stay ahead. What are some resources or online tools that you've found successful that other operators can maybe go to their IT director or their IT staff and say, hey, let's continue to grow, let's continue to develop? Are there any resources you can think of?
Yeah, so I mean, for us, what I like, CompTIA, a lot of our staff either has gone or will go through the CompTIA ranks. I like, a couple of their programs. They always update their content. So I think from a knowledge perspective for networking or security, those programs are pretty good. And, I think just sticking to your vendor training, right? So we have specific vendors that we work with from, either routers or switches or access points or, you name it, continuous training in those areas to make sure that you're taking advantage of the newest features, security settings, those types of things. And, there's a couple of my staff that will go through some security training. So you talked about, one of your friends is, gets paid to try to hack people. So, I went to that course and, I'll have a couple guys also go to the course, certified ethical hacker. Like the idea is if you know what to target and you know how to find weaknesses, I think it becomes a little bit easier to see it from the other lens of, okay, here's what I need to do to protect myself. So, I just think, focusing on security, focusing on network, focusing on, your vendor items. So, if you use Microsoft, if you use, Cisco or whatever type of router you use, just, taking advantage of any of the training courses that they have, is probably pretty important.
Do you say, okay, John Smith in the IT department, you have 4 hours a week to work on development, or do you just kind of, as things come up, send them on their way?
So generally, before the pandemic, like last year was a little bit tricky, but what we try to do is we try to, block out okay, we're going to take you out for a week and we're going to send you to training. And that's one of the things that I really like about the Hoffman organization is they're all in on continued training and education. So that's worked really well for us. So you take them out for a week block, they go to their training, and then once they're done, they come back. It's just at least up until now, it's been easier to remove them rather than try to piece it in 4-hour increments. But one of the things I said earlier, which is what I really like about the job, is that we're constantly throwing new technology. So, sometimes, the guys will spend, 8 hours or 16 hours with, hey, let's learn this. Let's figure out what it's all about. And I think that kind of just comes organically through working here.
AJ, I really appreciate you taking the time. I've been watching you. Really haven't had any of the coffee. I've just about finished mine, so maybe it's time for a beer. We'll see. It's almost noon, I think. So
I like that idea.
But we are on the clock. So thanks a lot for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. A special thank you to AJ Davison for coming on to the Modern Car Wash podcast. I hope AJ can now enjoy a nice cold beer when he gets home. And I hope our audience out there can enjoy a cup of coffee or a cold beverage as well. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, stay up to date through innovatedcarwash.com on any of our social media channels. You can also email the podcast at social@innovatedcarwash.com. We look forward to it, and thanks for listening.